presented in court. Instruction 3, nature of the case. In this case, Terry Sanderson and Gwyneth Paltrow were involved in a collision while both were skiing on the Bandana Ski Run at Deer Valley Ski Resort in Park City, Utah on February 26, 2016. Mr. Sanderson claims that Ms. Paltrow was negligent and that her negligence caused him harm, for which he claims damages. Ms. Paltrow denies that she was negligent, claims Terry Sanderson was negligent, and that his negligence caused her harm, for which she claims damages. Mr. Sanderson denies that he was negligent. Instruction 3.5, Deer Valley Resort dismissed. In this case, there was a claim against Deer Valley Resort, but the court has dismissed Deer Valley Resort from this case. Instruction 4, order of trial. The trial will proceed as follows. 1, the lawyers will make statements outlining what the case is about and what they think the evidence will show. 2, Mr. Sanderson will offer evidence first, followed by Ms. Paltrow. Law. You must follow the law as I explain it to you, even if you do not agree with it. 4, the lawyers will then summarize and argue the law and how they think you should decide the case. 5, the final step is for you to go to the jury room and discuss the evidence and the instructions among yourselves until you reach a verdict. Instruction 5, sequence of instructions not significant. The order in which I give you the instructions has no significance. All equal weight. I do not intend to emphasize any particular instruction, and neither should you. Instruction 6, jurors may not decide based on sympathy, passion, and prejudice. You must decide this case based on the facts and the law, without regard to sympathy, passion, or prejudice. You must not decide for or against anyone because you feel sorry for or angry at that person or anyone else. Instruction 7, no record of testimony. At the end of the trial, you must make your decision based on what you recall of the testimony, attention to the testimony as it is given. Instruction 8, note-taking. Feel free to take notes during the trial to help you remember the evidence, but do not let note-taking distract you. Your notes are not evidence, and they may be incomplete. You must leave your notes in the jury room at the end of each day, along with your copy of the jury instructions. The jury room is kept locked after hours. Instruction 9, multiple parties. There are 2 parties in this case, and each party is entitled to have its claims or defenses considered on their own. All instructions apply to both parties. Instruction 10, preponderance of the evidence. You may have heard that in a criminal case, proof must be beyond a reasonable doubt. But this is not a criminal case. In a civil case such as this one, a different level of proof applies. Proof by a preponderance of the evidence. When I tell you that a party has the burden of proof or that a party must to be true, then not true. Another way of saying this is proof by the greater weight of evidence, however slight. Weighing the evidence does not mean counting the number of witnesses nor the amount of testimony. Rather, it means evaluating the evidence. In weighing the evidence, you should consider all the evidence that applies to a fact, no matter which party presented it. The weight to be given to each piece of evidence is for you to decide. After weighing all of the evidence, if you decide that a fact is more like true than not, then you must find that the fact has been proved. On the other hand, if you decide that the evidence regarding a fact is evenly balanced, then you must find that a fact has not been proved, and the party has therefore failed to meet its burden of proof to establish that fact. At the close of the trial, I will instruct you in more detail about the specific elements that must be proved. It tends to prove or disprove a disputed fact. It can be the testimony of a witness, or documents, or objects, or photographs, which I sustain an objection, and any evidence that I order to be struck. Anything you may have seen or heard outside the courtroom is not evidence, and you must entirely disregard it. The lawyers might stipulate or agree to a fact, or I might take judicial notice of a fact. Otherwise, what I say and what the lawyers say is not evidence. You are to consider only the evidence in the case, but you are not expected to abandon your common sense. Facts may be proved by direct or circumstantial evidence. The law does not treat one type of evidence as better than the other. Direct evidence can prove a fact by itself. It usually comes from a witness who perceived firsthand. If a witness testified he looked outside and saw it was raining, or today it would be snowing, that would be direct evidence that it had rained or snowed. Circumstantial evidence is indirect evidence. It usually comes from a witness who perceived a set of related events, but not the fact in question. However, based on that testimony, someone could conclude that the fact in question had occurred. For example, if a witness testified that she looked outside and saw that the ground was wet, believability of witnesses. In deciding this case, you will need to decide how believable each witness was. Use your judgment and common sense. Let me suggest a few things to think about as you weigh each witness's testimony. How good was the witness's opportunity to see or otherwise observe what the witness testified about? Slant, the testimony. Was the witness's consistency? If the witness was inconsistent, was it about something important or unimportant? How believable was the witness's testimony in light of other evidence presented at trial? How believable was the witness's testimony in light of human experience? Was there anything about the way the witness testified that made the testimony more or less? Anything else you think is important? You do not have to believe everything that a witness said. You may believe the witness lied. You may disbelieve anything the witness said. In other words, you may believe all, part, or none of a witness's testimony. You may believe many witnesses against one, or one witness against many. In deciding whether a witness testified, remember that no one's memory is perfect. Anyone can make an honest mistake. Honest people may remember the same event. A deposition is the sworn testimony of a witness that was given previously outside of court, with a lawyer for each party present and entitled to ask questions. Testimony provided in a deposition is evidence and may be read to you in court or may be seen on a video monitor. You should consider the deposition testimony the same way you would consider the testimony of a witness testifying in court. Instruction 15, objections and rulings on evidence and procedure. From time to time during the trial, I may have to make rulings on objections or motions made by the lawyers. Lawyers on each side of a case have a right to object when the other side offers evidence that the lawyer believes is not admissible. You should not think less of a lawyer or a party because the lawyer makes objections. You should not conclude from any ruling or comment that I make that I and any answer. During the trial, I may have to confer with the lawyers out of your hearing about questions of law or procedure. Sometimes you may be excused from the courtroom for that same reason. I will try to as much as possible. Please be patient, even if the case may seem to go slowly. Instruction 16, statement of opinion. Under limited circumstances, I will allow a witness to express an opinion. Consider opinion testimony as you would any other evidence. Give it the weight you think it deserves. You may choose to rely on the opinion, but you are not required to do so. Value of the witness's opinion. Instruction 17, charts and summaries as evidence. Charts and summaries that are received as evidence will be with you in the jury room when you deliberate. You should consider the information contained in them as you would any other evidence. Instruction 18, charts and summaries of evidence. Certain charts and summaries, sometimes referred to as demonstrative exhibits, will be shown to you to help explain the evidence. However, these charts are not themselves exactly reflect the evidence. Instruction 19, out-of-state or out-of-town experts. You may not discount the opinions of. Instruction 20, conflicting testimony of experts. In resolving any conflict that may exist in the testimony of experts, You may compare and weigh the opinion of one against that of another. In doing this, you may consider the qualifications and credibility of each, as well as the reasons for each opinion and the facts on which the opinions are based. Instruction 21, questions from the jury not permitted. I want to give you an instruction regarding questions based on the testimony you've heard so far. Please be patient and wait to hear all the evidence. Sometimes the information you need to decide can only be presented by witnesses who may be called later in the trial. For that reason, you should not start forming opinions until after you've heard all the evidence. Also, the parties have spent many months to present to you to prove their side of the case. In some cases, they have asked and obtained rulings from the court as to certain proof that may or may not be offered to make the decisions that you need to make. That may or may not mean that all of your questions are answered. Sometimes the rules of evidence prohibit the kind of additional information that you think might be helpful, or since the parties have chosen not to present that evidence. In any event, you must make your decision based on the evidence presented to you. You should not speculate as to what other evidence that might have been presented might have shown. So that concludes the opening instructions. Are the plaintiffs ready to begin their opening statement?
Yes, Your Honor.
Do you want us to introduce first?
If you could, yeah. I neglected to do that. If you could please introduce who's at your table and your client, please.
Good morning. My name is Robert Sykes. This is Lawrence Bueller. He and I are the co-lead counsel here. We also have Kristen Van Orman and Peter Sorensen. Altogether, we are honored to represent Terry Sanderson here at the end. Thank you.
And the defense.
Thank you. My name is Steve. I'm here in town at a firm called, well, I should say Salt Lake City, at a firm called Epperson & Owens. This is Jane Egan, Noreen Aburama, Peter Jensen, and we're all here for Ms. Paltrow.
Try to decide which side is better. I might switch. Distracted crashes. Defendant Gwyneth Paltrow knew that looking up the mountain and to the side.
Counsel, you need to use a mic.
It's right here.
It was very faint on the.
Your Honor, while we're doing that, we should be clear that no witnesses at the trial are permitted in this courtroom. I'm not keeping track of everyone, but the exclusionary rule applies.
The exclusionary rule will apply, meaning that anyone who will be a witness in this case cannot. Did we get it operating? Okay.
Start again. Ladies and gentlemen.
Still can't hear.
Oh.
Rotate the base of that microphone.
Distracted skiers cause crashes. Defendant Gwyneth Paltrow knew that looking up the mountain and to the side while skiing down the mountain was dangerous. And she knew that skiing that way, looking somewhere else, blindly skiing down a mountain by looking up and side was reckless. And she knew if she continued to ski that way, that it was not a matter of if, but when, by looking up and to the side, it was not a matter of, she would crash into somebody below her, and someone would get seriously and permanently hurt. She knew what she was doing was dangerous. She knew it was reckless. Anyway, I think I just said that. But before we get into the details of this case, of how Gwyneth Paltrow's neglect, her choices, and her conscious disregard, 4 broken ribs, and permanent brain damage, we first have to talk how skiers are supposed to ski down a mountain, what the rules of safety are, the purpose for those rules, and what happens when skiers break those rules. That way we will all be on the same page, and we can get into the details of this case. Okay? All skiers know that when they are skiing down the mountain below them, because the skiers below them can't see behind them to control, as they turn left and right to control their speed, especially when there's multiple people on the mountain, it's the uphill skier's responsibility to yield the right of way to those below. And it's never enough to say, well, so what if I crashed into someone that was below me on the mountain? That doesn't mean it's all my fault. Because especially on a beginner run, below them trust that the ones coming behind are paying attention. That's what skiers do. Before they start down a hill, they take account of how many skiers are below them, what those skiers are doing, and they keep their eyes forward down the hill so they can yield the right of way. Challenging sometimes when skiers do these things. They get to enjoy skiing, they get to practice their skiing, and most importantly, everyone gets to go home safe at the end of the day, and that's a good thing. But some skiers say, well, what's so wrong with looking up the mountain behind me and to the side while skiing down the hill? Just because a crash occurs on the mountain with somebody that was below me, that doesn't mean it's my fault. And some skiers say, well, what if the person below me on the mountain was changing directions quickly? Maybe it's their fault too. And finally they say, look, what's the big deal? And it's attitudes like this, behavior like this, like these when crashes happen. And sometimes it's just a bump or a bruise. Sometimes it's a scare or a close call. But sometimes it's worse. Sometimes it's broken bones. Sometimes a concussion or permanent brain damage. And that's exactly what happened here. So let's get into the details of the case. Defendant Gwyneth Paltrow has skied since she was 3 years old and considers herself an intermediate skier. Ms. Paltrow has skied about a half a dozen times at Deer Valley Ski Resort. She hires multiple, which allows them to skip the lines. The private instructors cost thousands of dollars per day. On the day of the collision, February 26, 2016, Ms. Paltrow is skiing at Deer Valley with 9 people, including her 2 children, her future husband, Brad Falchuk, his 2 children, and 4 Deer Valley private ski instructors. Eric Christensen is one of those private ski instructors. He has worked for Ms. Paltrow's family for a handful of ski vacations in past seasons. Eric Christensen knows the family well enough that one time he sent her son some pottery that he hand makes. A few minutes before noon, Ms. Paltrow's group of 10 meet at the top of Bandana Ski Run to go to the bottom. Bandana is a green run about 3/4 of a mile long. Deer Valley grooms Bandana every ski day. Skiers have skied on it for 3 hours. The snow is packed. Although a green run, Bandana is steep enough for skiers to pick up speed unless they make turns. Slow signs are always at the top. So this is the top of Bandana Ski Run. This is not the day of the crash, but it's near to the crash site. And as you can see, the top of the lift is where people get off and start to, and they come down, and the rest of Bandana goes down about another half mile or so. just had one of Fisherman's Friends cough drops, and it's a little drier than I expected. Also at the top of Bandana is a meetup group of about 6 adults. A meetup group is a group that meets online to engage in activities like skiing, hiking, or bowling, or many other activities. Plaintiff Terry Sanderson is in this meetup group. Ski down, 4 of those in the meetup group ski down first, then Sanderson skis down to the right. Craig Ramone is another person in the meetup group who skis about 35 feet behind Sanderson. Sanderson and Ramone know each other only through skiing in this meetup group. So they're not really close friends, but they know each other. Ms. Paltrow, her 2 kids, and their 2 instructors are ready to go down to the bottom of Bandana for lunch. Before they ski, one of Ms. Paltrow's children says, Mommy, watch us ski." Okay. The children and their 2 instructors ski to the left. The 2 instructors are Eric Christensen, and she turns her head up to look at her children. As she turns her head back down, she screams, then skis back into the back of Terry Sanderson. Mr. Sanderson, 4 of his ribs, 2 of them completely. Sanderson's helmeted head hits the ground, causing a concussion as his brain strikes the inside of his skull. Sanderson is face down in the snow, unconscious. Skiing 35 feet above them, Craig Ramone is the only eyewitness to of the crash. Ramone skis down and stops just next to them. He had a witness of this crash. Ms. Paltrow is slow to get up. Her son's instructor, Eric Christensen, skis over from the left, Sanderson, and screams at Sanderson, who is not moving. "What did you do? What did you do?" Surprised by the crash, Christensen doesn't let up, so Ramone steps between them. Christensen stops yelling at Sanderson. Sanderson is still not moving. Sanderson, if he is okay, but Sanderson only groans. Craig Ramone turns to Paltrow. "Are you okay?" He asks several times, "Are you okay?" She doesn't say a word, and she slides a few feet down the hill. Terry moves a little and groans, "My ribs." Away and bolts down the mountain to the bottom. Christensen turns to Ramone. Sanderson moves more, trying to get his skis around. Eric Christensen steps closer to Sanderson, picks him up by his hands, and stands him up. Snow is caked into Sanderson's goggles. Christensen turns his skis down the mountain, and he bolts, skiing straight to the bottom, following Paltrow's group, leaving Sanderson and Ramone alone at the crash site. Sanderson is standing but hunched over, mumbling, and Ramone says, "Do you think you can ski?" "I think so." Sanderson tries but skis poorly. Ramone says, stop, you know how to ski." "Do you know your name?" "Terry." "Do you know where you are?" "I have no clue." Ramone says, "Let me get some help." And Ramone steps back and flags down a Deer Valley employee and says, "Can you get ski patrol here? This guy's been hit, and he's just out of it, disoriented." Within minutes, a Deer Valley ski patroller, Whitney Smith, arrives with a sled. Smith goes to the first aid station at the bottom of bandana. At the first aid station, Sanderson again is evaluated, and he still has some disorientation. His ribs hurt. Whitney Smith tells him, and the group of people in the meetup group that are with him, he needs to go to care in Park City. Terry goes to the Instacare with someone who drives him. He's not sure who it was. And at the Instacare, he's evaluated, but the Instacare says you need to go to an ER room. It appeared his pain in his ribs might be broken, and he still had, or he reported that he was unconscious. The next day, Terry goes into the VA emergency room. So what does the defense have to say about these things? First they say, and look up and saw the crash, I never saw Sanderson before he hit me. Sanderson was the one who hit me. This wasn't my fault. They also say, the defense, this is all Sanderson's fault. He's the one who can't remember the crash. My ski instructor, Eric Christensen, said he saw Sanderson above me making big turns and going really fast. This is Sanderson's fault. And they say, look, what's the big deal? He's 60, dementia and blindness in an eye and many other problems. Yeah, he broke some ribs, but those will heal. And 85% of people with brain injuries heal. What's the big deal? Oh, and look at his high test scores. He can't have a brain injury. And 4 broken ribs on the day of the crash. 8 hours later, he wrote to his daughter, I'm famous. That shows he can't be injured. And this is just about celebrity of Miss Paltrow. Because of the defense's claims that nothing Miss Paltrow did cause, we, on behalf of Terry and his family, we contacted Dr. Richard Boehm, a neurologist and biomedical engineer. He applies medicine and physics to understand traumatic brain injuries like this. Dr. Boehm, the defense says nothing they did caused the crash and Terry Sanderson's injuries. Is that true? And Dr. Boehm says, well, I don't know. Give me everything you've got, including medical records, scans, x-rays, examine him. Then I'll look at his case. But just so you know, you may not like what I say, but I'll tell you true. So we give Dr. Boehm, and Terry sees him for an exam, and after Dr. Boehm has reviewed these things, we call him up. So Dr. Boehm, what do you think? Boehm says, no, actually, absolutely, she caused this crash. She hit him from behind, which means she was higher on the hill than him. Well, but how do you know? Well, he broke his 4 ribs when she hit his back, knocking him down to the ground, and she landed on top of him, just like Ramon, the witness, said. The only way for his broken ribs on the right side could fracture like this is if she hit him from behind and landed on top of him, pressing his right arm into his chest. That's really the only way to have broken 4 ribs like this, too severely broken. Well, Dr. Boehm, the defense says he should have recovered from the concussion. Well, that makes no sense, because he still has symptoms more than 18 months after the crash. That means his brain injury is permanent. Well, Dr. Boehm, will you be willing to come to court to testify to our jury so we can get this right? Because the defense says they are going to take this all the way to trial. I'd love to, but I'm busy that week. But I can give you my deposition. So last week, the parties took Dr. Boehm's deposition. You, the jury, will see it this week. And just so you know, a deposition is an out-of-court ask questions to a witness, and in this case, it was recorded. So, and they say, yes, you've got 4 broken ribs, 2 of them broken completely, by various people at the VA, including speech therapists and other doctors, a psychiatrist, and he's trying to get better. Terry doesn't want to have. Terry was a eye doctor in the Army for 3 years, a captain, and that's why he goes to the VA. But after a year, he's still got symptoms of a persistent brain injury. So I refer him to Dr. Alina Fong. She's a neuropsychologist in Utah County, and she treats thousands of people who suffer brain injuries that are persistent. And Dr. Fong treated him about a year and 3 months after the crash to about a year and 6 months after the crash. And Dr. Fong will testify in this case via video deposition because she couldn't be here for trial also. She has a conference in the Netherlands because she treats patients around the world and is a known treater of people with persistent post-concussive symptoms, which is basically a brain injury. So litigation began after 2019. Terry went to see a neuropsychologist, Dr. Wendell Gibby of Utah, who's examined and scanned thousands of patients with everything from x-rays to MRIs to CT scans. And his specialty is also in neuroradiology, examining the brain. But he also examined the chest x-rays that were taken at the VA. And we asked Dr. Gibby. Dr. Gibby says, it's bad. His brain is permanently injured. He has persistent post-concussive symptoms. Although we can treat him, he will certainly have problems with his brain function the rest of his life. Well, Dr. Gibby, the defense says Terry's problems are pre-existing and his brain problems were there before the crash. Well, the defense says he has pre-existing brain issues such as NPH when he had the brain scan in 2009, 7 years before the crash. NPH, it's when your brain has too much fluid in the canals of the brain or the ventricles, and it builds up and it presses on your brain. It may actually make you more susceptible to problems from a concussion, but many people go their whole life without any symptoms. The evidence will show that Terry Sanderson had no symptoms of NPH prior to the ski crash. Dr. Gibby says because Terry was asymptomatic or had no symptoms before the crash, the brain injury he suffered in the ski crash has hired 3 MDs and 2 PhD neuropsychologists say, well, the NPH is causing his problems. And Dr. Gibby says, well, I'm not sure what they're thinking, but this ski crash caused Terry's current problems. Further, like Dr. Bain, Dr. Gibby thinks it's highly unlikely that Mr. Sanderson hit Ms. Paltrow. The way he sustained the injuries to his ribs is more likely than not caused by Ms. Paltrow landing on his back when Terry Sanderson hit the ground when she rode his back after the ski crash. Dr. Sam Goldstein, a neuropsychologist who has a clinic in Salt Lake City, who treats patients with brain injuries. He's been treating people like this for decades. We asked Dr. Goldstein, what can you say about Terry's injuries? The defense says Dr. Goldstein says, well, it's permanent and significant, this injury he had when Ms. Paltrow hit him, because his family and friends and the people he knows before and after the crash report, but after the crash, he has very significant problems. Because of that, we know, and because it's lasted for years, more than a year and a half, and now it's been lasted for 7 years, we know he has concussive symptoms. Goldstein says, yes, most people recover But in a situation like this, where frustration digs into his frontal lobes, so to speak, and his problems are permanent. Yes, he can alleviate them with treatment and medication, but he will have problems all his life. And these problems didn't exist before the crash. They came after the crash. And there is objective data that his ability to cope with life is diminished. Well, these doctors, Dr. Bain, Fong, Gibby, and Goldstein, you'll hear testimony from, 2 of them by videotape. And most doctors like them, before and after the crash, you, the jury, will hear testimony from some of them, like his 2 daughters, and either today or tomorrow you'll also hear from, they've been together about 1.5 years, and they spent a lot of time together. Miss Davidson spent maybe 3 out of 4 weeks with Terry Sanderson in Salt Lake City. They traveled the world together. Carlene Davidson knew Terry really well, and she'll report on what happened after Terry, or after the crash to Terry. A couple of things I'd like to discuss with you. The media has not been accurate. No Deer Valley ski employee saw the ski crash. Now, some employees saw, some people saw the crash.
I am going to object to referencing outside media.
Some people, the Deer Valley employees did not see the ski crash. The Deer Valley employees saw some things before the crash and some things after the crash. Craig Ramone is the only eyewitness who actually saw the crash. You're going to hear from him later today. He'll be the first witness. Now, after this crash, well, before this crash, Terry was a charming, outgoing, gregarious person. He volunteered for many things. He was a retired eye doctor in Lake City about 10 years ago. He was living a full life, traveling the world, doing everything possible to enjoy his life and guard his health. He did not want a brain injury. He did everything possible he could to fix his brain injury. But after the crash, he's no longer charming. The before and after witnesses will show you this. We asked Terry to step out during this part because I didn't want to rub his nose in his own problems. And during other parts of testimony from his daughters and some of the other before and after witnesses, Terry won't be in the courtroom. At the end of this trial, the evidence will have clearly and convincingly established that the value, not the cost, but the value of the damages done to Terry Sanderson is $3,276,000. We look forward to showing you all of the evidence.
Thank you, Mr. Bueller. Mr. Owens?
We have a short break.
Can we have a 5-minute break? And I do want to address one thing with the court.
Okay. Why don't we take a short recess between the lawyers?
This court has found that there is insufficient evidence to assert a hit and run. They didn't use the words hit and run, but they said she bolted. And this jury is under the misimpression that that is an issue in this case. It's not an issue. That judgment, all that remains is a negligence claim. One can't be negligent for bolting from the scene of an accident. That's an intentional conduct. So I ask for that instruction right now, even.
Your Honor, those are his exact words. And he's in front of, and it's been provided to defense counsel before the litigation, during the litigation, in a deposition. His deposition lasted 6 hours, and the defense interrogated him on this, and he never changed his testimony, and that's his testimony. Now, they can quibble with the testimony and dispute the testimony, but I did not use the word hit and run. Eric Christensen came up. People asked, "Are you okay?" The evidence is will show that what
Is that there may be an implication that it goes to duty, and as long as you're not making an implication that she had a duty to do something different, ruling on the instruction 45 will stand. Thank you. Short 5-minute break. Mr. Owens?
Members of the jury, thank you for being here, partly against your will. It's being the law. When people are in big disputes, our system, both our U.S. Constitution and our state constitution, allows these disputes to be done openly, publicly, and by a jury of one's peers. And I think it's a beautiful thing. It's slow. A lot of people complain about lawyers, but no one gets hurt in terms of, we don't burn people's houses down, we don't do acts of violence. And oddly enough, if a trial is done right, even the losing party feels that they were heard and understood, and that they feel some sense of peace. So if you can't tell, this is a big deal to the parties, and it's really special that you were chosen. You should feel complimented. You'll tell your children, and parties have. And so I thank you for that. Greece, ancient Greece, they used to resolve problems like this. Big disputes, bring in some criminal, some are civil. Usually means, can someone go to jail for it? That's criminal. Is someone asking for money? That's civil. So this is a civil claim. And a very historic tradition. The burden of proof is one of your statements here from the judge, and I just want to comment on it. Burden of proof is a weighing of evidence. So I put before you Lady Justice. If you're ever in Salt Lake, go to the Salt Lake City Council and look up, and it's this statute, although this is not the exact statute of her. But you've seen this around, and I've done another one for you here that I like to keep in my office. All right, so important about this. She's blindfolded. So one of the judges, you're not to award anyone anything because you feel sorry for them. This is important because over the next 2 weeks, we're going to hear a lot about Terry Sanderson's mental and physical health, both before the ski collision and. But we're not here. I can feel sorrow too, but that's not why you're here. You're here to figure out if someone negligently crashed into someone, or if no one did. And I think the law will permit you to decide that no one was at fault. Unlike a car accident or something, a ski collision is different. There are inherent risks of skiing. I know when I get on the top of the tram at Snowbird, and it's a gusty day like today, and I say, if I don't do this right, I could kill myself. I mean, it's a breathtaking, wonderful, exhilarating, but also a little dangerous, isn't it? That we're strapping on pieces of wood or fiberglass on our boots, and we're going down a very snowy, icy hill. So, I've been hit skiing. It was disorienting. It was unhappy. I was unhappy, to say the least. But I did recognize it as an inherent. Let me move on that. So the blindfold. The blindfold is, I'm not going to do this because I feel sorry for someone. Then the scales. Mr. Sanderson has brought the claim. As a result, he has to tip the scale. Okay? The tie means to the defendant. So they have to tip. That's who brought the claim. That's the weighing. And then you see the sword. Now, the sword can be, I'm seeking justice, so I'm proactively fighting it. And sometimes Lady Justice is actually seen with a shield. Let me see that she somehow left him an unconscious and bolted, and it's. I can tell you, we believe it to be utter BS.
Objection, Your Honor. Argument. He's supposed to present what he's going to show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just later. I want to hit the merits of the case first. So this can look, you're going to hear from brain experts and a lot of people to talk about this. But don't abandon your common sense. That's very important. I also want to just reference to you that someone's thinking lawsuit, then the records after someone's thinking lawsuit.
Objection, argument, Your Honor. This is an open statement. This is argument.
Sustained.
What was going on before and during, and then after. Some of the records before indicate that Terry Sanders had brain issues before. In fact, there was a prior MRI. Now, let me hit the accident, because I'd be silly to address other issues. In his 50s, she didn't ski for a long time because it was an emotional thing for her. That is Miss Paltrow. That is Gwyneth on the right. That is her son, Moses, on the left, on the very day of this ski accident. All right, so they're going up, and this was also, so it was a sentimental issue because she got into skiing, and she did it because she wanted her kids to learn like she had. Another thing, she had a boyfriend at the time who's now her husband, and he has kids the exact same age as Gwyneth's, mixed. See if this might work. So it was a special time, and it was a lovely day. So some ski events, we worry about, is the sun in someone's eyes? No one's saying that. Is it a snowy day? No. It was a nice day. How about, was it slick run? No. Maybe some of you know. I mean, it's a green hill. And so none of those factors kind of come into play. Moderately busy. And she's skiing, again, with a group. So her daughter, Apple, who you're going to hear from, Moses, who you're going to hear from, and then some Deer Valley people. Now, these weren't her people. These were Deer Valley instructors. I could have hired Eric Christiansen that day, just as Gwyneth did. And then Brad has 2 kids, and they had ski instructors. So that was their group. It was kind of a loose group, but nonetheless, they went to the top. They met at the top of Bandana with the plan. This was about 11 a.m. We're going to go down and have lunch. I think it's the Empire Lodge, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, so we're going to all kind of ski down. Gwyneth is a conservative right. So if it's like a highway, fast people go on the left. I don't know if it's the same, but she's far right, and then kind of small curves. And she's generally watching her kids, but she's not specifically watching them because they have their instructors. She's skiing, enjoying herself, and she hears, suddenly she sees 2 skis appear in her skis. And a man comes up right behind her. Now, they're not going fast. That's kind of the odd thing here. He comes up almost body to body like this and starts groaning. She doesn't know what's going on. What's going on? Am I being assaulted? She's moving forward, and then she's like, they begin falling to the right, and she's feeling freak, fair statement, and he hits down, apparently his side and his head, and she is essentially falling on, but keep in mind his skis are intertwined now with hers. Her first reaction is get away from this. It's to realize, okay, I'm not being assaulted. But this fellow, she had a more colorful word, has just run into me. And she said, "What are you doing?" Words to that effect. And he's like, words to the effect, "I didn't see you." And then there's a question. "You ran square right into me." And he said, "I'm sorry." He doesn't deny saying, "I'm sorry." He doesn't remember it, but he doesn't dispute it. Now, she's still ticked off. In fact, I don't have to give you commentary on him, but he will say he heard and turned. He heard and turned. That's what the Deer Valley guy says. Eric Christiansen, one of the instructors, said he heard and turned and then saw. So I'll comment just a minute more on Mr. Ramon in just a minute. Back to Gwyneth's story. On the scene, he's helping people get their skis off, and he's trying to figure out what happened. Now, Eric, backing up, they started at the hill. This is at the very beginning of the hill, by the way. It's not halfway down. It's not 3/4 down. It's the first quarter down. He's trying to figure out what happened, but the whole thing, if I'm misstating it, we're going to have to defer to their testimony when they testify, but I'm trying to give you a big picture. He's making a much wider turning, and guess what? He's blind in one and has decreasing vision in his left eye. He has hearing aids. He's had heart, stroke, many other medical conditions. Just weeks earlier, he had told his doctor, "I'm feeling old suddenly." And Terry's story, by the way, is that he's coming across and he sees a struggling younger woman, not younger. So he's actually turning his head to clear the beginner skier. And what happens? He comes right upon Gwyneth. He back turns. Suddenly, she's there. So the Deer Valley report, do you mind? By the way, Deer Valley is not a party to this lawsuit. The court dismissed Deer Valley. So Gwyneth's not Deer Valley. Its own.
Objection to argument, Your Honor.
Overruled.
Deer Valley stands on its own, and I don't know if they're going to assert like there's some massive cover-up or what, but...
Objection, argument.
Sustained.
By the way, I think the goal is to give everyone a little better access with these little screens, but it hasn't worked. Eric Christiansen, remember, he hears and he turns, and he goes directly over there. He's there within seconds, and he's seen what happened. And what does he say? Can you blow up the first half? Chief complaint, male skier took her out from behind. And then we won't focus on exhibits anymore really today on this, but first thing male skier said, does that say said? I can't read it. Anyone? Stated was that she appeared right in front of him, thus admitting that he was the uphill skier. She never saw him because he came in from behind. That was the Deer Valley instructor. Interestingly, Eric's trying to figure out, Eric Christiansen, the skier. Everyone okay? Everyone okay? Now, they any collision, you take a body blow, it takes a little while to gather your senses. Recognize, okay, I'm safe, okay. But his answer was he was okay. And he was not happy still. Moses, he's now 16, but he was a 9-year-old at the time, was with his instructor. His instructor started to come over. Moses came over, and he saw his mom, and he was worried. He hadn't seen his mom. First of all, she's on the ground, and she's yelling at this guy. She might have said something like, "What the F word?" And I think she might have said the F word. We're going to figure that out. And she's mad. And he said, "I haven't seen my mom like that." And he was sort of personally a little upset. Right. And then, okay, everyone's okay. Everyone's okay. And Eric Christiansen, the ski instructor, said, a ski patrol person who's different than the instructor, everyone okay? And he said, Mr. Sanderson and Craig Ramon, who you're going to meet this afternoon, talked to each other and said, we're okay. And they said, we're okay, and the ski patrol left. All right, now everyone's okay. And then I think Eric Christiansen, okay, Gwyneth, you can go. Join your family. By the way, your family's waiting for her at the bottom. Brad, interestingly, had heard it and looked up and saw his wife on the ground and had come back up, and she had skied down to be with him, not to leave. By the way, you'll never hear the words in this whole trial. This was not a hit and run. The plaintiff even had a ski expert evaluate it, and he said it's not a hit and run. So take that out of your mind. All right, so, all right, now what's going on? Okay, everyone's good to go. Everyone went. Terry, right before he left, apparently, Eric Christiansen said, your buddy just took out Gwyneth Paltrow. They didn't even, no one knew who she was. By the way, she had a helmet and goggles and everything. Guess who who denied that? Craig Ramon. Their so-called first skier has a whole different crazy story. Your
Honor.
That is not been a reassert my crazy comment. All right, so I'll continue the story. Everyone's good to go, good to go. Okay, then they now hear she's Gwyneth Paltrow. And they're like, okay, well, let's ski down. So they ski down a ways further. And Terry, I shouldn't call him Terry, Mr. Sanderson, does not feel good. He feels confused, he says. So you'll hear them like, well, let's get a ski patrol person now. We had previously waved one off, but now we've changed our mind. We need ski patrol. Toboggan person comes named Whitney, and she pulls up, and Mr. Sanderson says, I don't know. I'm not sure. He did not say, I was just hit. Interestingly, Craig Ramon, the friend, did not correct that statement. So Craig Ramon, by the way, never once told Christiansen she hit him. He'd help. Part of this crazy story is, he says, Mr. Sanderson was out cold for 2 minutes, unconscious. Now, do you know how long it is to look at a person who might be like dead or dying for 2 minutes and not do one thing? He didn't do anything. It's not true. Everyone on the scene was saying, absolutely. If he was not 2 minutes, Chris Jansen's going to just ignore someone who's out cold. He's saying, I'm okay. He's on his feet. He's declining ski patrol. Very different story than someone who's cold. I said, did you start CPR? Like, were you?
Objection, Your Honor, an argument.
Sustained.
Gwyneth didn't have a helmet. He says Gwyneth didn't have a helmet or a face mask or a goggles on her. She had those things. She doesn't go around skiing. She's safe conscious, and she's probably a little celebrity conscious about, like, I don't do that. So anyway, we'll address that. Person's pretty smart. She goes, hey, I want you to remember, I'm going to tell you a few things, and I want you to remember them. And they're unique things. We'll get into it later. And at the bottom of the hill, she's checking them, and he remembers all of them. In fact, he's a poster. So he posts a very happy, smiling picture of the toboggan person and a very articulate comment repeating, like she went to Michigan, she won this ski thing, very detailed. And he posted major traumatic brain injury. All right, so our talk, where you think head injury is important. So, by the way, he takes Ramon and one of the women he was skiing with, and they're all smiles. Like you'd post, you wouldn't know, like this is taken by someone who just suffered a major head collision or something. And boom, it's posted. Okay, great. This is good because we're getting real life things from him to an Instacare person. Instacare person says no signs of confusion. Okay, that's a big issue, right? If we're worried. By the way, there's a nurse on your panel, but I take it from our experts that you'll hear that if you essentially you are diagnosed. I mean, you have a concussion. I mean, so maybe it's more than that. I might be simplifying it, and forgive me if I am, because nothing I'm saying is evident. I can't rule out problems, so you should get a CT. A CT is imaging of the brain, and he ends up going to the VA hospital the next day. The CT, it's interesting. So he had a stroke-like event and lost his right eye, like 6 years earlier. So we have imaging of his brain 6 years earlier, and guess what? There are defects in that new CT, but guess what? They were there before. And guess what their experts didn't do? Go back and look to see if the problems in his current imaging is present on his 6-year-old CT of the brain. It's kind of crazy. They're interviewing him. He's telling them things. But no one's actually trying to go back and sort of say, look, is his brain different? Okay. Daughters. By the way, there was reference to 2 daughters. He has 3 daughters. He's on the outs with that. Why do we dig into this? No one wants to dig into this. But if a 75-year-old man says, I don't think as well as I used to, my brain doesn't work as well as I used to, I forget things. We have to, which is why we're all here, we have to go back and look at these things. If he says my relationships were harmed by Gwen, we have to go back, it's kind of a deep dive, and say, what were your relationships like before this? And it's not pleasant. I mean, like, half of the trial is going to be on this kind of stuff, because if someone says, I have a severe $3 million by you, we have no, I have a lawyer obligation to represent my client and say, what's true? And I'm telling you, he does have confusion. He does have strained relationships. He does forget some things. But and his pre-existing problems coming forward and progressing. Back to the story. So Instacare, they say, go get a CT tomorrow. And then he posts, and let's put that up. So he's a post, okay, big on Facebook. So there are lots of pictures of him. What does he post to his daughters? I'm famous. He doesn't post googly gawk, is that the right word? Confusing stuff. Could you highlight the bottom half? I'm famous. This is a friend and eyewitness, this Craig. And he posts it. He posts it. Wouldn't you be interested to know what this post was in real time? This video or photo, it's apparently video.
Objection, argument.
Your Honor, that's just. Wouldn't we
Part
all
of the
like to
opening
know? I apologize. Were it okay?
Yes.
Wouldn't we like to know what this was?
Objection, argument, Your Honor. This is argument.
Sustained.
It's nowhere to be found. We're in a courtroom 7 years later trying to figure out what happened. It was right there. Nowhere to be found. And then, can you do, I can't believe this is all on GoPro. Where's the GoPro? Do we want it? We want it. It's nowhere to be found. I'm glad you're okay. He's telling his daughters, I'm okay. All right. We're trying to put together a lot of facts. You're going to hear, I don't know, like 20 people are going to come in, half of them medical people, and try to figure this out. It'll be interesting. I think after this trial, you'll go, that was cool, actually. You learned a lot, and you are given to our community. But about half of the information you're going to hear, if you find that Gwyneth did not cause the accident, you can actually, so we're going to hear a week of evidence on Terry's brain, Mr. Sanderson's brain. But if you find no negligence by, then you can disregard all that.
Your Honor, I object. This is a classic argument.
Sustained.
$1 bill. Gwyneth was hurt by Mr. Sanderson's negligence. When he came up behind her, paralleled her, and went. She says she has a prior knee problem, and she is upset. She has she never got down to the bottom of the hill. And who was waiting for her? Her daughter, Apple, now 18, then, no. 11. Sorry, I got that mixed up. So, and Apple's like, what took you so long? And she said, some a-hole just ran into me. I think she used the real word. All right, why is this important? She didn't say, I just ran into someone. She was mad. And over lunch, she was mad. And then after lunch, she said, I'm going to ski the rest of the day. There's even a text from Gwyneth's own phone to Eric Christiansen. And they're like, Moses wants to know if you're coming. And she went in. And she lost her full day pass that she had paid for, and she only got to ski half a day. In addition, she had paid for her instructor, who now was diverted from teaching her son Moses to take of this collision issue. And so we ask you for $1. Now, this is a lot to go through. for adult family
Objection, Your
vacation.
Honor, this is again an argument. This is classic argument.
These are
This
facts.
is closing argument.
Overruled as to the comments that are being made right now, those are facts?
Yeah, and let's keep the interruptions to a minimum, would we?
Well,
On
don't argue then.
Well,
She came for a family vacation. Half the afternoon was kind of ruined. And so that dollar is important to us. It's important to my client. Let me hit a few other things. You've been very patient. I think I said, it's hard to unpack someone, a 75-year-old, who says, I don't think as well as I used to. Heaven help me if my daughters were called to the stand and they say, hey, let's talk about all your dad's mental quirks and problems and his physical health and his deterioration as he ages. I wouldn't want to be present for that. It would be hard. And yet, we're here because Mr. Sanderson is making that allegation, and so we have to do it. So I'm an old man, but keep in mind we have to do this because they have said Gwyneth owes me $3 million. I mean, we have to address that. So I kind of apologize in advance. Mr. Sanderson threw a press conference. Sanderson said, 3 years later, she came out of the jungle like King Kong, screaming. That I apologize. I'm sorry. When asked by the ski instructor, he said, she appeared right in front of me. And when asked by the toboggan person, he said, I don't remember. I don't know, or I'm not sure. Memories of this case get better over the years. That's all I'm going to say about that. He was a vet. We salute him. And he went at 1 month. He went at 1 year. And I guess 1 year and 2 months, and 1 year at 3 months. Okay, so 3 different assessments, neuropsych assessments. This is where a smart person is trying to figure people, and he's complaining, and they're doing assessments on him. And what does he do? Above average, above average, above average, above average, above average. A year and 2 months. High IQ is average. Processing speed, average. Overall cognitive ability, intact. 1 year and 3 months later, goes to someone else. These are 3 different people. 3 different people. He's alert. His affect is appropriate. His speech is normal. His thought process is logical, linear, and goal-oriented. All good. His perception, no disturbance. Attention, normal or above normal. Not the hired people. Let me just say that. She was dangerous and reckless. She's skiing with her 9-year-old son, who's a beginner, just so you know. Dangerous and reckless. You decide. We need your help. The community.
Objection, Your Honor. This is argument again.
Sustained.
Thank you.
Watch me ski. There was a comment, somehow she's distracted. Gwyneth doesn't remember that. The kids don't remember that. But if I guess someone says, hey, look at me, but these aren't like 3-year-olds at a swimming pool. And she is focused. She is not distracted. She got taken out from behind. I mean, that's what happened. And that's enough on that. Posts. So again, we can curse public media or social media, but it does do one thing well, doesn't it? It's like sort of documents people. And he's a poster. So guess what? He went on traveling all over the world after this. After the trips, which he did those too. But I'm talking about big, long international trips. He does yoga, he swims, he stays fit. His life is not a disaster.
Your Honor, I object. This argument again.
Overruled.
Our experts, you will hear from them, and I won't go through name by name. 2 are Eastfold and Askenazi. These are smart people who are trying to put everything together and are just saying, so he's aging, he has prior problems, and he's now obsessed, essentially, with this lawsuit. I mean, I think the best thing, after this is over, this will be a good thing, win or lose, I think.
Objection, Your Honor. That's argument.
Sustained.
They will say that. Our experts.
Objection, Your Honor.
Our experts will. With Lady Justice. So the blindfold you get, we're not going to feel sorry for him. We're not going to make our decision on that. The weighing of evidence, they have to have more evidence than not. And the third, we are defending a false allegation, and we need your help. And
Your Honor,
thank you so
this
much
is
for
argument.
doing it.
Should be sustained.
I'm done, and
Overruled. Just a little latitude there.
that's about 10 overruled objections during my closing, which I think is inappropriate, Your Honor.
Why don't we approach the bench, please?
Justice and conservation ever, anywhere in the world. Through our historic sites and make our nation more resilient to the devastating impacts of climate change. We also relied on important partners to help us meet these goals. Farmers and ranchers have implemented critical conservation and stewardship practices across 50 million acres in private to the Tongass National Forest and the Salmon Bristol Bay. We restored the protections and status the previous administration rolled back and Bears Ears National Monument. The Grand Staircase Escalante, the northeast canyons and seamount of the Marine Monument. Last year, it matters. This matters because when we conserve our country's natural gifts, we're not just protecting the livelihoods of people who depend on them, like the family farms, outdoor recreation, businesses, rural community. welcoming visitors from all across the country and around the world, as that matter. We're protecting the heart and the soul of our national pride. We're protecting pieces of history, telling our story that will be told to generations to come. You know, our national wonders are literally the envy of the world. They've always been, and they always will be, central to our heritage as a people and essential to our identity as a nation. That's why the budget I released earlier this month includes new funding to increase access to our natural areas for Americans from all backgrounds. We're going to continue to take aggressive steps toward conservation with the big actions I'm about to announce today. First, I'm proud to use my authority under the Antiquities Act to establish and I want you to know it's a big